All right, so hi, welcome back to Save the Date, a survival kit for all things dating from Coffee Meets Bagel. Welcome back, everyone. So one of my favorite life principles is the phrase "begin with an end in mind." If we don't know where we are going or where we want to end up, we're going to meander a lot and sometimes get lost, maybe even end up in a place where we thought we wanted to be, but it wasn't. And I think oftentimes in dating, we start just dating, start meeting people without having a clear idea of who we want to meet or what kind of relationships we want to create. And that can be a cause of a lot of very painful dating experiences. So today, I'm really excited to have Amari Ice here with me today. Amari is the author of a book, Lasting Love at Last, The Gay Guide to Attracting the Relationship of Your Dreams. He's a matchmaker. He's the first gay black, he's a dating coach. He's the first gay black dating coach to be certified as a matchmaker by Matchmaking Institute. And he has coached over 500 daters with 75% success rate in terms of helping them find a relationship. And he's an expert hypnotherapist. And today he's going to help us really get better at this art of figuring out who we should meet. What should our end look like? And of course, he's going to answer a lot of your burning dating questions that you submitted prior to the show. So welcome, Amari.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's first open with this question that we talked about right before the show. What is the story behind the crown?
Yeah, so I wear this crown as a reminder to play more, to not take love so seriously. We're going to be most attractive, most engaging, most fascinating when we are having fun. When we're in that state of like childhood, childlike passion, that's when we're going to be most attractive to a potential partner. And so the crown is to remind you to play more, to not take love so seriously. When you treat it like it's fun, when you have fun doing it, that's what's going to make it be a very easy path to lasting love. So, yeah.
I love that. I think I need one of those as well. So please let me know after the show where you got that.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, before we get into the meat of the conversation, Amari, I want to make sure we guide the listeners properly. So your book is Gay Guide to Attracting Relationship of Your Dreams. And that's great because over 90% of CMB daters are looking for that great long-term relationship. But how much of our conversation today do you think applies to all daters versus specifically to gay daters?
100%, for sure. So the cool thing about the book and the work that I do, so I am, as you said, a certified hypnotherapist, relationship coach, and matchmaker. And my skill set, the knowledge and tools that I share with people really work for any relationship. I just specifically focus on gay relationships because that's what I've had the most experience with. But yeah, for sure, 100% of what we're going to talk about today is relevant and applicable to all relationships.
Yeah, when I read the book and I'm a straight female dater,
Mhm.
and your book, I thought, all the advice and the tips that you were sharing and the principles were very applicable to my own dating life. So for sure, I 100% agree with that. So one of the things, and we talked about this before, one of the things I loved about your approach to dating is the emphasis you would actually put on in spending time to really figure out who you want to meet, what are your needs and what are your wants, right? And in fact, you recommend the daters to actually take a complete break from dating and dating apps so that they can think really clearly, which I dig. And so let's really delve into this more because I want to make sure our listeners can have a very clear idea of how they can actually create this vision of who they should meet and feel confident that they actually have this correctly.
Mhm.
And so first, could you tell us what you mean by what we want versus what we need?
Yeah, so lots of us are familiar with the list that we put together as it relates to our desired relationship partner. And many people have hundreds of traits on this list. So I want them to have X number of dollars and to be this tall and to have abs or whatever the case is, right? We have all these different traits and characteristics that we want in a partner, but those wants, while nothing's wrong with having what you want, we often bypass or totally exclude or don't even consider what we actually need from a partner in order to be happy. And because of that, a lot of times what we want serves as a barrier to getting what we need from a partner when that want doesn't really matter in terms of what's going to make us happy long term. So sometimes those wants can act as deal breakers when they're not actually deal breakers.
Okay, so could you, I think, what do we want? What's my need? I don't, those are not questions, something that, we entertain on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So when you ask me, what is it that you need from your partner?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be like, I don't know. So could you give us some examples to help our
Yeah.
listeners, yeah, kind of get going?
For sure. So these are going to be specific to you, right? And the easiest way to know what you need is to look at your previous relationship history. So for most of us, those of us who've dated at least someone in our lives, we have enough information to really get clear on what it is we need from a partner. And so what you're going to do if we get into the grains, into the weeds of this specific activity, let's talk about that. And so I'll first say that if you want to take a look at this activity, you want to do it for yourself, you can actually get it for free on my website at lastingloveatlast.com. And underneath the free book, you can also get the Lasting Love Toolkit, which includes this activity that we're talking about right now. So lastingloveatlast.com. So first of all, you're going to make a list of, say, the 3 to 5 most recent or most impactful relationship experiences you've had. So relationships, situationships, people that you've dated, but maybe it didn't go anywhere significant. However, they still had a significant impact on your life. So you really want to focus on the people who really mattered or meant a lot in terms of your dating history. Okay, so we'll start there. And if you've never been in a relationship or never dated, this still works. So take people that you've had crushes on, or someone you think you'd want to date. And you could even use a celebrity to stand in. So someone you might know really well, you can also use that person as a stand-in for this activity to get some of the data that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so definitely works whether you've been in a relationship or not. But what you're going to do is take those 3 to 5 people and make a list. So you don't have to use their names. You can just write their name if you want, but also you could just do an initial. And for each person, you're going to list the 5 things that you liked or enjoyed most about the person, the 5 assets that stand out most about them. And also, on another column, you're going to write the 5 things that you disliked most. And so these are often the things that made the relationship end or fail to progress in the first place, okay? So the 5 liabilities is what we would call these in this case, okay? So once you've made that list, 5 things you liked, 5 things you didn't, you're going to take the liabilities and invert them, okay? So, for example, if you dated someone who was lazy, what you really wanted was someone who was motivated, right? Self-motivated. If you dated someone who was, say, cocky, right? And they were like too cocky or arrogant or narcissistic, what you really want someone is someone who's secure in themselves, secure in their abilities. And so for each of the liabilities, you're going to invert them into the qualities that you actually would have preferred instead of those liabilities. Okay. So now once you've inverted them, you're going to have both the assets from the original list and the inversions. And you're going to put those together and notice any of the traits that stand out or that show up more than once. So perhaps out of those 5 people, 3 of them were confident, and that was the thing you listed as the asset or as the inversion, right? Maybe all 5 of them were very loyal and steady, right, in terms of their personality. So note which ones show up more than once. That means that specific trait is more important to you, okay? And so once you have all of those, you're going to put them into categories in terms of the type of trait they are. So we have material traits, things like money, house, a job, right? So the physical material traits. Then you also have those traits that represent body, so the actual physical in terms of how we show up. So perhaps height or weight or any of those types of physical traits. You're going to have mental and emotional and spiritual traits as well. So things like humor or confidence or sensitivity or communication, right? So you're going to put those into those 5 categories and rank them within the category from most important to least important. Okay. And you can also add any other traits that maybe didn't show up in the initial assets and liabilities list. You can add any other traits that you're like, oh, but I think I want this too, and rank it within that list. So now you have a ranked list in each of those 5 categories: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and material, right? And then you're going to take the top 10 traits across all 5 categories and rank them from most to least important. And now you'll have a list of 10 qualities that are the most important to you. And this is what I call your excellent lover list. The top 5 traits are going to be non-negotiable. Okay. And then the person needs to have at least 3 of the 5 remaining traits. So they need to be at least an 8 out of 10 in order to be viable for a long-term relationship with you. So that's a quick and dirty explanation of this process. It takes a little bit longer than the explanation to actually complete, but that's how it works. Yeah.
Okay. So that's pretty clear, I think, to me at least. And what if again, going back to my original question of like, I think in the book you make a distinction between the wants and needs.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say my list, and so I was kind of doing this using me as an example when you were explaining. So let's say from those lists, a couple of things that were on this excellent lover list of mine was somebody who makes sure that I feel listened to, somebody who is tall, somebody who is, who has a graduate degree, somebody who has, who loves to travel with me. So let's say that those were the top 5, let's hypothetically. So how do I know which ones are my wants and needs, and why is it important to make that distinction?
Yeah, so here's the cool thing about compatibility. There are really 5 crucial components of compatibility, and I refer to these as MATCH. So it's an acronym to explain each one. So M is going to be mission and values. And so when you think about what you need from a partner, the number one component of long-term compatibility is going to be having similar values. So our values are what really drive us in terms of our long-term, lifelong perspective on the world, right? And so these are the places that we are growing toward, if you will. So the values tell you the direction that you're growing toward. And if your values aren't compatible, that means you're going to end up growing apart. Okay? So that's first. And then A is attraction. Okay? So this is going to be those physical traits. Are you attracted to the partner? You definitely have to be attracted. It doesn't have to be a burning forest fire attraction, right? It can be a little spark or a lot. Doesn't really matter the intensity of the attraction, but attraction has to be there. Then T is temperamental synergy. So this is your compatibility in terms of your personality styles, your personality types, right? So you don't have to have the same personality, but you do have to have personalities that mesh, that get along, that really are able to understand each other and value each other for who you are. C is the capacity to meet your needs, and that's where the excellent lover list comes from that we just talked about. So if you follow the activity in the way that I described, those are going to be your needs versus the wants. Usually what happens with wants is we just pull them out of thin air, or we heard someone say it and we put that on the list. That's how we often know it's a want. But we know it's a need because based on our actual experiences, these are the reasons why things ended or not. And another thing that you're going to do when you make this list and you're ranking them from most to least important, you're asking yourself, why is this thing more important than this thing, right? So you're doing that comparison in between for each of the different traits to see what's most important. And so once you actually completed this activity before you got to the final 10, you may have 50 to 60 different traits on that list. And just by going through the process of ranking them, it helps you to really get clear on which of these things you can live without versus which ones you can't. And so it's internally, you already have enough information to really hone in on the things that are most important, but it's the noise generally that keeps us from doing it in everyday life. So this activity really helps you to weed out the noise. So that's the first part of that. And then H, for those of you who are wondering, H is hazard free, meaning you can't have any of each other's deal breakers. So that's the match. Yeah.
So on that list, if I'm hearing you correctly, so I said, like important to feel listened to, it has to be tall, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 6 feet, has to have a graduate degree or higher, and has to like travel. That's one thing that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say those four. And are you saying that if I actually went through the exercise and, actually ranked everything, um, some of these that are on this top won't be at the top? Like, what
Great
are the
question.
wants and needs here? Like, of the four
Yeah,
things that
yeah.
I just picked out.
So here's what I'm really saying. With the specific example that you gave, some of those are actually your values, right? So you're someone who loves to travel. Travel's not just an interest. You have the value of being open to new experience, right? You want to explore the world and learn more about things. So that lifelong learning is always going to be a core part of who you are. And so in this case, we wouldn't even, it's important, but we wouldn't even put it on this list. That would go to the values list, meaning it's more important than many of the other things. Okay. So everything that you mentioned is important. It's just where it goes in that, in the match acronym that's really, ticky tacky in this sense here. But yeah, each of those things are going to be important for you. And then the physical trait, so however tall he is, that would go in the attraction part. And so we know since values are most important, what we're going to look for first is the values compatibility. If that's aligned, everything else is going to be easier to fall into place. But if the values aren't aligned, it doesn't matter if they have any of the other traits, if you're attracted to them or anything else, because you're going to grow apart eventually anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, so one thing that I really wanted to make it clear for the listener is some of the things that you mentioned in the book, which is I think in the book you mentioned that wants, which
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's called preferences, are
Mm-hmm.
circumstantial,
Yep.
it's optional, versus needs are not negotiable.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, though, our wants, the preferences, we actually confuse our needs with socially expected preferences. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say something like my height would be preferences in my opinion, because
Mm-hmm.
is that really my need? Like, what need is it actually fulfilling?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we actually get confused about like needing that versus actually, is that just me wanting it?
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up is I think a lot of us are daters. Something that we struggle with is when we actually have a lot of wants,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for us to actually be able to pick who we want to end up with. And not a lot of people actually look good because they're not meeting all this wants, and that could be a barrier to us being able to be in a
Yeah.
relationship. So I thought those comments were really valuable. So that's kind of where I was getting at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And here's how you know, right? Usually, and especially with the excellent lover list, the physical traits, what we do generally is not include them in the list of needs. Okay. So the physical traits are more like a marker of I'm usually attracted to a person who looks like this. That's like the package, that's the wrapping. But what's inside are those personality traits that really allow the person to have the capacity to meet our needs. And so here's what I mean by that. The person who is going to meet your needs long term has to have the capacity to do that now. Meaning, if we look for someone and we fall for potential, which many people do, the only way to guarantee that someone has the capacity to meet our needs later is that they have the capacity now, which means they actually have those traits. They don't have just the potential to have the traits. Okay. So it's about personality. It's about our disposition, right? The way we really approach life. And so the physical traits are still important, but those are not the things that satisfy us long term, if that makes sense. So physical traits, no one is saying that they aren't important. they are important because you have to be attracted to your partner. But if you only look at physical traits, you're missing out on whether or not this person can meet your needs. So the physical is usually not the need. And the older that we get, for most of us, the older that we get, the more we recognize that physical traits actually doesn't matter in the same way that we thought they might have when we were younger, because everybody's body goes as we get older. Right? And so once that happens, you're like, oh, well, what matters now? We're 70 and neither one of us have abs or any type of definition or tone to our bodies anymore. What actually made me want to be with and stay with this person? What kept me here? The body might have got my attention, but it's those internal traits that the person has that actually caught my soul and my heart. And so
What?
that's how you want to look at this. It's those internal traits that matter more. Yeah.
Right. So what about things like degree, and those are not physical, but
Mm-hmm.
it is definitely, I mean, I guess you could say it's not internal traits. Or
Sure.
sometimes we have things like religion.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have ethnicity. We have all these other things that we could have that's not physical, but
Yep.
not necessarily internal.
That goes back to the values. So there are 5 key life values that most people have to varying degrees. And so your conversations with potential partners, you want to have this discussion to see where they fall, where they fit in these 5 key life values. And you also want to know where you are, because this, again, is the #1 component of long-term compatibility. And so those 5 are faith, family, fitness, finances, and profession. So if you, in terms of faith, are you religious, not religious, spiritual? Like, what is your perspective on faith? You want to get clear on that first, and then you want to find a partner who also has a similar value within the faith category, right? Same thing with finances. It's not necessarily about, I'm a spender, so my partner needs to be a spender too. Like, it's not that specific, but what is your lifestyle, right? So when we think about mission and values, those intersect to form the foundation of our lifestyle. So when we look for partners who fit our lifestyle, what we're really saying is that lifestyle is a surrogate for values. I know what matters to me based on the life I live, and I know what matters to you based on your interest and the way you live your life as well. And so it's really the values that matter. So
So would
education is
you
one of those values.
so would you say that values are the needs, and then the rest of like non-value items are basically wants?
Great question. And not exactly. That all 5 of those things in the match acronym are important. Values is just most important.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of us actually in theory know that, okay, maybe things like physical traits or maybe
Mhm.
degrees or maybe, maybe those things, I know that those things don't really matter in the long-term relationship. But like you said, attraction is something that's very hard to control. And if I just find myself being attracted to only those type of people, even though I know that doesn't matter in the long run, like what do I
Mhm.
do? I feel stuck.
Yeah, so you have to ask yourself, why are you attracted to certain types of people? This is especially true when you keep being attracted to people who you know aren't good for you. Okay? If that's the case, that means there's a subconscious pattern of self-sabotage that you have. And that's when you would see someone like myself, who's a hypnotherapist or traditional therapy, to help you shift that subconscious pattern. Because our subconscious mind is where all of our emotions, our beliefs, our behaviors, and our patterns of self-sabotage live. That's all in the subconscious mind, which controls 95% of our lives. The conscious mind, where discipline and willpower live, is only responsible for 5% of our lives. So if we consciously make a decision, oh, I'm going to only date people who are good for me for now on, right? From now on, I'm only going to date people who are actually good for me. But subconsciously, we're programmed to go for the bad boys or the bad girls or whatever. The subconscious is going to win, but only 95% of the time, because that is what is strongest within us. And so we have to shift that program on the subconscious level, or else we'll keep repeating that pattern and we'll keep bumping into that same wall over and over. So if you notice that that's the case for you, what you want to do is work with a professional who can help you shift that pattern on the subconscious level so that you don't keep sabotaging yourself.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book, I thought was really good tip when it came
Mm-hmm.
to this topic is, going back to like asking yourself, hey, what is the underlying reason this seems important to you? So for example, if for me, if it's a degree, and it's a true story, I did actually have a degree requirement before I have a graduate degree myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
always thought that, okay, I'm only going to date somebody with a graduate degree also. And I did actually really find myself being really only attracted to people with the graduate degrees or higher
Mm-hmm.
once upon a time. And you suggested, hey, like, what of that character, that degree, what meaning are you actually attributing to
Yep.
that? The fact that this person has a degree, what meaning are you attributing to that? And if I actually had asked myself that question when I was in that state of mind, I think I would have said, well, I think, well, because I want a partner who I can respect. Well, okay, does that mean that you can only respect people who have degree? Why, right? Why do you have that
Mm-hmm.
assumption? Oh, well, because to me, degree actually implies that, somebody who wants to make an impact, a positive impact in this life. And then you can kind of ask yourself, like, okay, is that necessarily true that
Mm-hmm.
only people with graduate degree actually wants to make an impact in the world? Well, I mean, I obviously know that the answer isn't true. And then I think that line of thinking would have actually made me maybe not necessarily attracted to the
Mm-hmm.
person, right, the person without a degree right away, but at least be open to meeting people who don't fall into that criteria. And when you actually are open to meeting people and you start meeting people who don't have that category and realize for yourself, like you truly really get that the meaning you attributed to yourself wasn't actually true,
Yeah.
I think that's when the attraction kind of falls apart. And at least that was my experience. I started meeting people who didn't
Mm-hmm.
really necessarily have a graduate degree, and my current partner definitely doesn't have a graduate degree. And it takes time, like you said, because subconsciously you're programmed for you to actually fall out of this attraction kind of pattern.
Absolutely.
But I think one other thing that you could do is just being open and keep exposing yourself to people who are outside of that requirement to really get for yourself the meaning that you're attributing to that character, whether it's height, whether it's degree, whether it's whatever other physical traits, um, actually necessarily it isn't necessarily true. And when you really get that, I think the attraction kind of starts fading away. At least
Yeah.
that's been my experience.
And here's a little tip. Whenever you have a requirement, if you ask yourself, why is this important to me? And you can't give yourself a viable answer, usually there's some sort of bias going on there that you want to unpack. Because once you're clear that, oh, I value this thing. This is important to me. And this is what I'm going to do regardless of if anyone else is there or not. When you recognize that this is a value for me, then you want to find someone with compatible values. But also, when you recognize that that's true, it's easy for you to then see what the physical representation of those values are. Because again, what's happening with our biases, with our prejudices, etc., is that we're using a specific physical or material trait as a surrogate for something internal. So in the same way that when we say, for example, we want a partner who's over 6 foot tall, what we're really saying is we want to feel protected and safe, right? But is it a requirement that a person is over 6 feet in order to be protective? No, not at all. And so once you've gotten underneath that and you recognize what I really want as a partner who makes me feel safe, then you start looking for the feeling of safety when you're with someone versus just their height. That makes sense?
Yes.
Because you'll assume that anybody who's over 6 foot is going to make me feel safe. And then you get into a relationship that ends badly and you're like, what happened here? It's because you were looking for the wrong thing. You looked at a symptom that you thought was related to another actual piece of capacity that wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. And when you think about the fundamental human needs that we really have, it's important for all of us to be met. Things like emotional security, things like feeling of loving and being loved and being belong somewhere, being understood. Those are the fundamental needs that oftentimes our partners absolutely need to meet. And I think um, I definitely have done this myself. I think sometimes we get confused and attribute that need to some external things like height or, income or whatever else,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that is a signal that it would satisfy those fundamental needs that I have, but it often is not true. And for our own sake, we really need to be able to evaluate that properly.
Yep.
Um, all right, so let's actually now get into questions, because we have a lot of great questions that people submitted, eager to have them answered by you. And so I picked out a few that I think would be awesome for us to talk about. The first question is, what's the best way to help uncover chemistry and attraction?
That's a great question. The best way to uncover chemistry and attraction. I'm going to answer this two ways: the scientific way, but also the real life experiential way. So, what is chemistry and attraction in the first place, right? Scientifically, it's when something in us recognizes something in the other person that makes us feel a sense of familiarity, right? And so you probably heard that saying, like, do opposites attract or do birds of a feather flock together? Which one is it? For long-term relationships, the more familiar we are, the more closely our values match, the more safety we experience, because familiarity breeds safety, the more comfortable we're going to be with that partner long term. But things that don't make us feel safe, right, are interesting. And so when we feel crazy attracted to someone, when it feels out of control, that's usually because we don't feel safe. Okay. And so there's a difference in attraction. There's this feels safe and comfortable, I want more of this, versus this feels like a roller coaster ride and it's exciting. And so those of us who may have had traumatic experiences, and I say this is like small T or big T trauma, we might be attracted to dangerous situations in relationships because of the things that we went through in our past. And so when you find that that's happening, it's a chemical dependence to some extent on the danger, okay, versus the chemical attraction to the safety. So that's what's happening scientifically. Experientially, the way that you know whether or not there's chemistry is because you feel good when you're there, okay? You feel good. You want to be here longer. You don't want the date to end. You want to keep talking to them, even though you have other things to do, right? And so it's not necessarily this out of control, I can't think about anything but them right now. However, it is a leaning toward them rather than leaning away from them. You're going to feel your body naturally want to be closer to them. That's one of the ways you can tell, especially if you are the type of person who is in your head a lot. When you feel your body moving toward that person, that's usually a good sign, because again, the subconscious controls 95% of our lives, and the body's consciousness is like, oh, this feels right for us. Okay. So notice how you react, notice how you respond, notice if it feels just the same as everybody else versus a little more special. Okay. You're gonna feel that feeling when you're paying attention. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love the distinction you made, between the sense of safety that is really important for long-term relationship, and the
Mm-hmm.
sense of novelty and risk-taking and, something new and dangerous, kind of like a sense of thrill, which is also really important because that's what makes love fun and chemistry.
Yes.
But I think we have to be aware that just because there's a chemistry and attraction doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually good for us in the long term. Um,
Yes.
and vice versa. Of course, if you don't have a chemistry, then nothing's going to start in the first place. But eventually, you have to be able to feel safe about this relationship in order for it to work out in the long run.
Yep.
Actually, I
You
have
have
a
to think about
follow.
it like this. Even if you don't want kids, like you might know, I never, ever, ever want kids. But if I did want kids, would I want them with this person? That's the question you want to ask.
That's a great question. Um, The follow-up question I had is that similar to this, that I also get from a lot of daters
Mm-hmm.
is, okay, let's say we have this list, like we took the time to create this list. And for me, it was like travel open-minded and somebody who's open to new experiences and somebody who really makes me feel listened to. those are traits that sometimes is a little bit difficult to assess. Like, when I actually meet somebody, how do I know for sure that these are, this person actually has this too? And, um, sometimes a lot of us are unsure. And
Mhm.
so how do we actually go about doing that? Making sure that this person that just started seeing, I don't really know this person that well yet. How do I know if this person has this excellent level list quality?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to know what you want and need from a partner to be happy. Because if you don't know it, a lot of people think, oh, I'll know it when I see it. No, you won't.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. So we
won't.
got that list, right? So
Yeah,
then I
so
had
now
these
we
two.
have the
Yeah.
list. We know what we're looking for. The next thing that you want to do is create questions, open-ended questions, not yes or no questions. So questions that will lead to an explanation to actually see if that person has the trait. So we want evidence that this trait exists in this person, that they have the capacity to fulfill that specific requirement. Okay, so you're going to create questions for each of the traits on your list. So when you go on a date, those are the questions you ask. A lot of people are like, I don't know what to talk about on a date. This is what you talk about. Now that you know what you're looking for, you know what questions to ask to see if they have it or not. And then the second part of this is time. You want to see if there's consistency of those traits over time. So we know what we want. Now we just wait a little while to see if this looks the way we thought it did or if it measures up to what we were looking for. So just keep dating them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a
I
very
love
short
what,
amount of time, you'll be like, oh, okay, this is pretty consistent. I'm sure they have this, and this. And that's what leads you to the night before the wedding, not wondering if this is the right person or not, because you did that on the front end. You already knew what made someone the right person. And then you just saw if they fulfilled those traits. Just like a job interview. We already know what we're looking for in the candidate. And now we interview them, playfully, of course, to see if they have the capacity to fulfill the responsibilities of the position. And in this case, that position is co-pilot to your life.
yeah. And I love what you said about consistency. And, we
Mm-hmm.
can interview people and just like job interview, like you said, but, they can say all these things, but just because they say it doesn't mean it's necessarily true, right? And not
Right.
that maybe they're explicitly lying, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
they think they are, but they're actually not. So I think just actually taking the time to observe, do their actions actually match the words? And do they actually tell consistent story? I think that consistency is really important.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I get questions like, hey, I'm not really sure. How do I know? Well, more often than not, if you're unsure yet, that means it's on the not side. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that you're asking questions that you're unsure, that means that you need more time
Yeah.
to rather than just actually trying to conclude at this moment this person is it or not. I think, and I definitely was in this camp as well. Like I want to know right away, right? Because I don't want to be wasting time. But there is no other way around in dating. It just takes time. Dating is a process of getting to know somebody and getting them to know you. And you cannot take a shortcut in that. It takes time. I think that's a fact that we have to accept in dating. We want it to be short, but it's just not possible.
Right. Which is
Um,
why I mentioned the reason I wear the crown, right? It's a reminder to play more, to not take love so seriously, because it is going to take time. And if you treat it like a chore, that time is going to take a longer time than it really needs to. But if you're playing the whole time as you're seeing what this person is made of and who they are, then that experience is going to be a lot more positive, a lot more engaging, a lot more fun. And that's what leads you into a happy relationship. You have to have a happy journey, right? And that requires you to be at peace with yourself so that you can have fun. Because the reason that most of us are having a hard time in the dating process is because of our dating anxiety. It has nothing to do with the other person. So we have to be at peace with self and at peace with what we want. So most of the time when I hear someone who's like, how do I know if this is the right person for me or not? That means they haven't done step one, which is clarify what they actually need. Because if you know what you need, it's so much easier to tell if the person can meet those needs. So yeah,
Great. So, oh my God, time flew by. So, last
always
question
did.
I get to ask. Sometimes I don't get matches well. it's hard to feel motivated to continue to date or to online date. How should I keep going without feeling bad? And how do I keep myself motivated?
Mm, this is such a good question. I love this one. And this explanation, I'm going to try to keep it short. So we can have a whole masterclass just on this question. So the thing about dating, right? You've probably heard people say that it's a numbers game, right? But more than just a numbers game, it's an alignment game. And so whenever we feel like we are tired of doing this, we're tired of what's whatever the process might be, that means we're not having fun anymore. So in the moment we are no longer having fun, we are sabotaging our own success in love. Because literally, the same feeling of fun and enjoyment is the feeling of love. Those aren't separate. And so when we talk about falling in love, what we're really saying is that my normal emotional frequency is not in love in the first place. And so I fell into it and I blamed it on the person I was with. But that means I'm also blaming them for whether or not I fall out of love too. So when we take responsibility for our own happiness, when we take responsibility for keeping ourselves in love before a partner comes along, the dating process is also easier to navigate because it's more of like, think about going and hanging out with your friends. That's how you want to treat the dating process. It's supposed to be fun and enjoyable and not this big deal. So the moment you see that it's too much work, that means you're doing it wrong.
So how do I get to it right?
First thing is you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Right? And am I willing? Because here's the truth, right? Everything that you currently have, whether you like it or not, is a result of your subconscious programming. All of that is your comfort zone, right? Which means anything that you want but don't currently have is also a result of your subconscious programming and is outside of your comfort zone. So the thing about getting something that we really want that's outside of our comfort zone is that we have to go out of our comfort zones to get it. And anytime an opportunity comes along to give us something that's out of our comfort zone, it will often look like misfortune or too much work or too tedious because it's outside of our comfort zone, right? So what you have to do is get comfortable with the work that is required to produce the result you're looking for. In this case, a relationship. You have to get comfortable with dating. You have to get comfortable with dating online or in person or whatever it is. You got to get comfortable with the dating apps. Until you get comfortable with it, it's always going to feel too hard. And then you'll want to quit, which means the real question is, do you actually want a relationship or not? Because this is the cost. It
Mm-hmm.
requires you to put forth this effort, attention, and intention. And you can decide that the love of your life isn't worth that. That's totally fine. But be clear, this is what is required. So you just have to decide, do you actually want a relationship or not? If you do, let yourself enjoy the process and get used to it.
Yeah, and I think it's, that state of do I really want this or not? It doesn't have to be permanent, right? It could sometimes, there's a period of time, no, I'd rather just not deal with this right now. Then completely take a break.
Yeah.
And then there will come after taking a break for a while, and this is definitely true in my experience. I've dated a lot,
Yeah.
where I do start thinking about and get excited about and reminded of like what it was like when I was actually in this amazing relationship. And well, some of my best memories of my life, it was when I was with this person. And then that memories kind of get me excited again about wanting to be in this thing. And I think it's important to take a break and kind of get yourself in the right mindset, like you said, so that we're showing up to our dates with the right attitude, that also will impact the outcome of the date itself as well. Great.
Absolutely. We got to remember
Yeah,
that rest is not the same thing as giving up. We all need rest, right?
right.
You don't have to go, go, go. Take breaks sometimes because in the rest, in the play, in the relaxation is when you replenish your energies, reconnect with your needs, and renew your commitment to the goal you've set for yourself. So, absolutely take a break.
Right. Great. Thank you so much, Amari, for your time. And there are two questions we actually ask every guest. What is the best
Mm.
dating advice you've ever received?
Oh, okay. Here's a really good one. It's so simple, yet so powerful. And I'm going to use um, a neutral gender pronoun, okay? If they like you, you'll know. If they don't, you'll be confused.
I see. I see. Great. What is the one advice you think you could help CMB daters who are looking for long-term relationships in today's dating world?
Ooh, ask me that one more time.
What is the one advice you think could help CMB daters who are looking for long-term relationship?
Okay, here is the thing. There are two major reasons why people aren't in a relationship and they want to be. Okay. First is subconscious patterns of self sabotage. The baggage, the emotional connection to the past keeps us from being able to let new people in. Okay. So that's the first. The second is not having the skills needed to find and keep love. Right. And so most of us, because of our culture, we think that love is this fairy tale experience that's supposed to magically find us if we're lucky or if it's in the cards or in the stars. But in reality, love isn't a fairy tale. It's much more like a video game. And the number one reason anybody is single is because they're trying to have a level 25 relationship with level 3 skills. So my biggest piece of dating advice is to invest in your relationship skills in the same way that you invest in your professional skills. Read as many books as you can, work with mentors, hire coaches, take classes and workshops. Do everything that you can do to shore up your relationship skills and to heal from those subconscious wounds. And that is what makes lasting love inevitable.
I love that advice. Thank you so much, Amari, for joining us
You're welcome. Thanks
today.
for having
Thank
me.
you. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for joining Save the Date. And I will see you in 2 weeks with another awesome guest. Stay tuned. Bye bye, everyone.
Yeah.